Good evening, everyone. My name is Dima Blyshchak. Hi. I'm a president of Ukrainian American Community Center. On behalf of Ukrainian American Community Center, I am a profound honor to introduce United States Senator Amy Klobuchar. Senator Klobuchar has shown unwavering leadership in confronting Russia's unjustified and brutal aggression against Ukraine. Aggression that has devastated countless innocent lives, especially mothers and children. Russia's forcible deportation and abduction of Ukrainian children is not just a crime, it is a war crime and a blatant violation of international laws. Senate Bill 2119, introduced by Senator, represents a powerful and necessary response to this atrocity. It will help hold Russian criminals accountable and support the safe return children to their homeland. We're deeply grateful to Senator Klobuchar for commitment to justice and for standing firmly with Ukraine in this hard time. Please join with me in welcome Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Councilmember Rainville, for being here. And thank you to my husband. I always want to introduce our council member before my husband. But he is here as well and cares a lot about this. And I also want to acknowledge the children that are here, given that this is our subject. And I think about all the Ukrainian festivals that we go to where the kids are performing and upholding the Ukrainian culture. Oh, there goes one stuffed animal. There we go. And then you think of these children who've been abducted, and how what a sad tragedy this is. But seeing these kids not only brightens our spirits, but it reminds us of what can be. I want to thank our incredible speakers that are here today with us. And we've got with us, of course, you just heard from Dima, who it runs a community center, but also Father Ivan is with us. He's not going to speak, but I guess he spoke this morning at church. I don't know. But I want to thank him for his leadership, and Pastor Ruslan as well. Thank you for being here and all the comfort you give to the Ukrainian community here. Maria Doan, you'll be hearing from her. Thank you, Maria, for your leadership. And also Iryna Borbol. Both of these women have been involved in Ukrainian American organizations that have been advocating for the return of these children. And I know it feels very far away to be doing it from here, but if we're quiet, they have no one to speak for them right now. And it is on our country and our allies and the leadership in Ukraine, who's of course on the front lines fighting this war. And so it's really important, and I know it's important to President Zelensky, that we keep making this case. It's a case that is obviously important with these kids, but it's also a case that when we tell the story, it is really hard to turn your backs on Ukraine when you hear this story. Every day, you provide services and strengthen our understanding of Ukrainian culture here. As we know, our state is home to 20,000 people of Ukrainian descent. It was a privilege to be here in February when we marked the somber 3-year anniversary of Putin's unprovoked barbaric war in Ukraine. And I want to thank you for welcoming me back. The reason we are here today at this critical moment, as we know that the president has been recently announcing more help for Ukraine in the form of arms and hopefully help with our allies as well, and possibly making an announcement tomorrow. Okay, I don't know what that's going to be or if it's going to happen, but we just continue to push in every single way that we can. But one of the things that I hope that he will address tomorrow is these 20,000 kids. We believe that the figure is actually higher than 20,000 children. That's the Ukrainian government best estimation. We believe it's higher, 20,000 kids that have been stolen by Russia, because Russia has targeted orphanages and vulnerable kids who may not be accounted for. And it is very, very difficult to trace everyone in the middle of a war. As researchers at Yale have documented, this is a deliberate, coordinated program directed and run by the Russian government. This isn't just one family or some children that were taken in a house. This is a deliberate, coordinated effort. And one of the horrible instances even used Russian military transport planes. If you wonder, is this really being sanctioned by their government? It is. These children are being sent to more than 20 regions across Russia, these Ukrainian kids, from the Black Sea to the Pacific Ocean. And we keep learning more about what they endure from the kids who have somehow found a way home. This includes Maxim, who's 17 years old. As you can imagine, the older kids are able to communicate and remember, as opposed to the babies and the little kids who may not even remember at this point their own families and their time in Ukraine. So this 17-year-old Ukrainian child had been abducted, handcuffed, and taken to a military enlistment office to be drafted into the Russian army. And because of his age, he was able to escape and went into hiding. We know Russia is militarizing Ukrainian kids, trying to force them into the horrible position of fighting against their own people. It also, one of the kids abducted includes 11-year-old Ilya. When his hometown of Mariupol was mercilessly shelled, so many of us saw the images of that on TV, his mom was killed right in front of him, and he was wounded by shrapnel. Russian soldiers took him to a hospital in Donetsk, where he actually suffered more. The first operation to remove a fragment from his leg was done without anesthesia, and despite all his injuries and his pain, the Russians tried to make him, as he put it, a kind of propaganda tool. Ilya was forced to learn how to write in Russian. He was told by his doctor not to say "glory to Ukraine," as I've heard so many of you say at festivals here, but "glory to Ukraine" as part of Russia. That's what they made an 11-year-old say. Putin is trying to erase their Ukrainian identity and heritage. And the more time goes by, the harder it may be, as I noted, to find these kids. Their names and origins are being obscured, their faces and voices change as they grow up, making them harder to identify. Think about a 4-year-old and how they're going to look 3 years later. It's going to be hard. Some of them are so young they may not remember. We cannot accept a world where kids are being abducted during war, and we cannot allow children to be used as a form of hostage taking for negotiations. I firmly believe that it must be the policy of the United States to support efforts to bring all the Ukraine kids back, and I have colleagues from both sides of the aisle who agree. In March, I led a bipartisan group of senators to call on the State Department to continue supporting efforts to investigate Russia's abduction and deportation of Ukrainian children. This came after the State Department terminated a contract with the research team working to find the Ukrainian kids. After pressure, the State Department actually turned the money back on, turned the program back on, but only through last month. That was all they would agree to do. Unfortunately, that support has now ended, and that team at Yale is now turning to crowdsourcing to try to get the funds online. I am advocated for continued funding through our appropriations process, so that's one way we can get the funding. Another way, of course, is if the State Department, which we believe has enough money to cover this, it's not that much, that the State Department would simply give them the funding, or we pass it as part of the end of the year national defense bill, or as we advocate in the bill that Senator Grassley and I would like to pass, using frozen Russian assets to pay for this. So that's after we called on the State Department to re-up the funds, which they did through June, Senator Grassley and I introduced a bipartisan resolution on May 20th calling for the unconditional return of abducted Ukrainian kids before finalizing any peace agreement to end Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine. You see, we understand there's going to be negotiations. We understand that it won't end up exactly as everyone wants, but we don't think these kids should be part of those negotiations as hostages in these negotiations. They should be released before the negotiation occurs. Last month, Senator Grassley and I introduced the bipartisan Abducted Ukrainian Children Recovery and Accountability Act. Our legislation does three things, and I will note that Senator Grassley chairs the Judiciary Committee of the United States Senate. That's why it was important to do with Senator Grassley. The legislation first enhances support for Ukraine's efforts to investigate and track the abducted children. 2, it helps those kids who make it back home and need support during a difficult transition. And 3, it reinforces efforts to hold those who commit these crimes accountable. Ukraine's prosecutors have opened up tens of thousands of war crimes cases. They need sustained support from us and our allies. So before any peace deal is finalized, every child must be returned. These kids are literally being treated like prisoners of war. But they weren't soldiers. They were just little kids. They must not become pawns in the negotiations. Because this is not just about politics. It is about moral clarity and basic humanity. These kids deserve to know who they are, where they come from, and that the world didn't just turn away and close its eyes. We're not going to turn away. And one of the things that gives me hope when I get down about this is this incredible community that we have in Minnesota, from the work of Pro-10, the group that are helping soldiers who lose their limbs in Ukraine, to our faith community, Ukrainian faith community, to the work of elected officials, to this very community center itself. So with that, I am going to first turn it over to Maria Doan, who is the president of the Minnesota chapter of the Ukrainian National Women's League of America and an advocate for the Ukrainian American Community Center. And then we will go from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator, for your moral clarity, for your courage, and your continuous support for Ukraine. By introducing Senate Bill 2119, you are helping to shine a light on one of the darkest crimes of this war, the mass abduction of Ukrainian children. This bill is a powerful act of solidarity. It affirms that the United States will not stay silent while children are stolen, their identities erased, and the families shattered. The Russian Federation is carrying out a systematic, state-sponsored campaign to take Ukrainian children. This is not a consequence of war. That is a war crime. Children from occupied territories are forcibly removed from their families and communities, often under the guise of safety or evacuation. They are then sent to the sports and education camps deep inside Russia or Crimea, places that promise safety but instead deliver isolation, indoctrination, and trauma. Once there, children are stripped of their Ukrainian identity. Their names are often changed, their birth records are altered, their citizenship replaced. They are taught to speak Russian, forbidden to speak Ukrainian, and told that their homeland no longer exists. Some are placed with Russian families and adopted illegally. Others are held in the state-run institutions, where the access to the outside world is forbidden. Russia is not only taking these children, it is trying to erase who they are. All of those actions are markers of a genocide. More than 19,564 cases have been verified. In the beginning of the war, Russia openly bragged about taking over 700,000 children. As of today, at least 2,245 children are still missing, and over 1.5 million lived under the threat of occupation and forced displacement. This is why this bill matters. It gives US the necessary tools to act to stop this. It prioritizes coordination, support for the NGOs, and sanctions against those responsible. It deepens US involvement in the international coalition for the return of Ukrainian children. This bill is not about geopolitics. It's about children, and it's about justice. It sends a clear message. The US will not look away. Human rights defender and Nobel laureate Alexandra Matviichuk has documented these crimes in a very painful detail. She warns that these are not just abductions. They are attempts to break children's souls. She has described children who don't know who they are anymore. Children who were punished for speaking Ukrainian, who were forced to learn Russian, to sing the Russian anthem, and to study using Russian textbooks in which their homeland no longer exists as a country. Children are now afraid to use their language and their own identity. Russia is doing everything it can to prevent these children from ever coming home, including denying access to the international investigations, blocking family reunification, and spreading propaganda to justify these atrocities. Despite these barriers, Ukraine has brought home 1,399 children, which is only 7% of those confirmed cases. But when they do come home to Ukraine, these children are never sent to institutions. They are welcomed into families, both biological or foster, where they receive trauma-informed care, psychological support, education, and they are on a long, difficult path to healing. In all honesty, each such return is a small victory, but it shouldn't be this hard. Behind every stolen child is a stolen future and stolen childhood. And behind each of those numbers, there is a story of a grandmother searching, a sibling left behind, a child who no longer remembers their name in Ukrainian. Senate Bill 2119 is a moral stand. It says clearly, we will not let those children disappear. There can be no peace without justice. And there can be no justice until those children are returned. Before I close, I would like to introduce someone who embodies both the pain of displacement and the power of hope. Iryna Borbol is a family educational mentor here at the Ukrainian American Community Center. She arrived in Minnesota in 2022 with her 2 young children, fleeing the war. Like many mothers, she believed the war would end quickly. But instead, Minnesota became her second home. Today, Iryna supports newly arrived Ukrainian children and youth, helping them navigate a new life. She has seen firsthand what happens when children are forced to grow up under occupation, where their identity is a threat, their language is forbidden, and their very existence politicized. Please join me in welcoming Iryna Borbol.
My name is Iryna Borbol. I am a mother. I am Ukrainian. I am Ukrainian refugee and a family educational mentor here in Minnesota. I work with families with kids who fled Russian occupied territories. I have seen what this war has done for kids. Children who were told that their language didn't exist, that their identity didn't matter, that they are nothing. But they are not nothing. They are survivors. And I'm from the western part of Ukraine, and in the first from the first days of the war, I became a volunteer, and I help other volunteers to meet kids from the eastern part of Ukraine. We met buses of children leading from the east in February, in March, in April. Every day it can be like from 5 to 10 buses, sometimes at night, sometimes during the day, and it was cold, it was freezing. The children arrived only in pajamas, without no shoes, without nothing. Many had no parents with them at all. Some were left behind. Some had no one left. And when we met them, what was strange for me, as for mom, as for educator, as for human, they didn't cry. They didn't scream. They just stared, like eyes wide, eyes empty. It was hard. It's 3 years ago, and I remember their eyes. Like eyes broken. We place them everywhere we can, like in churches, in schools, like cultural center, like Ukrainian American Community Center, also in our city. We gave them like urgent things, like food, warm clothes, blankets, but that we couldn't give them their peace, their lives. And like when I prepare for this speech, I remember everything in my mind. And I remember one girl. Sometimes she came to me in my at my night time. She was like 6, maybe 5 years old. She came from Mariupol, and her parents were gone. She held a little jar, glass jar from jam, but that inside wasn't jam. There were dry pieces of bread, and she never let it go. She always held it when she sleep, but she was sitting. It was her lifeline, her memory, and her grief, and memory about parents. But when to speak overall about kids that we met, what was like very hard is that when you came to the room, and there are like 25 kids, some with adults, some by themselves, some with older brothers or sisters. You came to the room, imagine you came to the room where 25 kids, and you hear how they fly. It's silent. It's like motionless. It's still. Like 4 days, some of them didn't say a word. Some, during the months, they didn't speak at all with somebody. No contact by eyes. It's okay when you met adult with the empty eyes after trauma or something, but it's awful when you met kids with empty eyes. Kids shouldn't be with empty eyes. Like their eyes were locked in place, we couldn't reach somewhere else. And and after this I think about others kids. The ones who didn't make it to us, who were taken by force, stolen, or lost. And bringing them home is not a political act, it's not a paperwork, it's not a diplomacy, it's a moral duty of us. It's a justice. And is giving kids back their names, their language, their mothers, and their truth, is that they are Ukrainians. And we do not have time. It's important. It's important to do how more quickly, to do immediately. Please help us with this. And now please let me turn it back over to the senator and for the time for questions and answers.
Very good. You may have said it all, so,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, so, any questions from anyone? It's kind of hard to follow that. Oh, you have a question? Good.
Why were kids taken?
Why were the kids taken? Well, because this is a horrible war where this man who runs Russia, right, Vladimir Putin, he has decided that he's going to invade a country that is not his. And so as part of that invasion, they've killed a bunch of people, and Ukrainians have stood up and fought them and done so much better. Everyone had thought that the Ukrainians wouldn't be able to fight such a man, such a big country, but they haven't given up. And as part of this, when they invade, when the soldiers come in from Russia and take over certain parts that aren't theirs, then there's kids there. Sometimes there's kids whose parents are killed. Sometimes there's kids who are lost. Sometimes there's kids who are in orphanages. And instead of turning the kids over to some kind of a international group or giving them to the Ukrainians or to the neighbors, they have just taken them and brought them to Russia. And it's part of their argument that they have made that Ukraine shouldn't exist and it should all be Russia. And so that's why they are trying to take away the kids' knowledge of who they are and what their songs are and what their country is. So it's very sad. There are kids that have found their way back, and there are kids that were taken to places where they then found them, and that's why we know more about the stories and the facts than we did before. And that's why we're trying to figure out where the kids are, because a lot of it you can figure out and make sure the kids are returned as we look toward ending the war in peace. Okay? All right. Okay, we had our junior journalist. Okay, John Rash, he's not going to be beat out by you. Just start your
senior journalist. I think as good a question as that, so very well asked and very well answered. Thank you very much. But I would like to know, Senator, what kind of response are you getting from your fellow senators on both sides of the aisle with this bill, and even in a deeply divided Washington? Do you think that this will be something that can get through the Senate and then over to the House?
I believe that it can. On the resolution, that was a lot easier, right? It's just a resolution, but it said the same things. It said that this was bad, the kids should be returned before any negotiations, and we had a number of Democrats on the bill, as you can imagine, but we had Republicans like Senator Grassley, Senator Wicker, who is head of the Armed Services Committee. I went with Senator Wicker to Poland right when the war started, when all the refugees were coming in. And Senator Ernst of Iowa is on the bill, Senator Rick Scott, who's pretty conservative from Florida, Senator Mullen, who was in the military, Senator Young, and Senator Susan Collins, who heads up the Appropriations Committee. That's very important as we look at how are we going to get the funding to make sure that this continues. So we had a number of others that were supporting the resolution. Now the legislation is about actually making sure that this is funded from the government and the State Department. And so Senator Grassley and I just introduced that bill, which is a separate thing. And we're looking to add more of the people that I just mentioned to the bill. And then, of course, communicating with the State Department, with Senator Rubio, as former Senator Rubio, now Secretary of State Rubio, and with the White House about this. And it's a very important thing to as I mentioned, the government of Ukraine and the people of Ukraine. And it's also very important for Americans to know all the facts about what's going on, because they get exposed to a lot of things that aren't true on the internet. Not you kids, because like you're really like onto the facts. But there's a lot of people that are reading things that aren't true on the internet, so getting this story out there is really, really important. So our hope is that this becomes not even a question anymore, that we continue funding this, but of course that's just the immediate. The real goal is to bring the kids back and to end this war on terms that allows Ukraine to be Ukraine. Okay, yeah?
Thank you, Senator, for being here, first of all, and supporting our community. I have a question. There's a talk about exchanging Ukrainian stolen kids for some prisoners of wars. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so oftentimes when there's negotiations going on, people exchange prisoners of war, right? That has happened some in this war, and it's happened in other wars. That's not what these kids are. These kids, as was mentioned, taking these kids is against every single rule of war there ever is. This is not an exchange. This is a completely ugly aberration, and that has to be addressed immediately, and the kids have to be returned. And as was also mentioned by one of our leaders here, I mean, whatever adoptions occurred, they were illegal adoptions. They were illegal. So the sooner the kids come back, the better for these kids, because right now they are so far away from where their families are. And of course, if their parents died, Ukrainians are warm-hearted. There are many family members that would be willing to adopt, but they were never given that choice. The kids were just taken away. So that is not a fair exchange, to exchange kids for prisoners of war. The kids have to come first, and then the prisoner of war exchanges, whichever ones still remain, could be part of any negotiations, but there have been ongoing exchanges as it is.
Thank you.
Well, one more question.
How do kids get taken?
How do they get taken? Well, maybe one of our, you want to answer this and explain how some of this has worked? Sure.
Sometimes the kids are taken from the occupied territories when their teachers are encouraging their parents to send them, let's say, to Crimea to spend time in a summer camp. But what happens then is truly a tragedy. Parents sometimes, because they're afraid or because they get ambushed into sending their kids, they sign the documents allowing those children to go into those facilities. And then after they spend some time there, the children are told, your parents refused to welcome you back. You're Russians now, and you will be placed in Russian families. And that's one of the ways it happens. Often, once there is a shelling and children are wounded, Russians are not really trying hard to find their parents. They're taking them. They're not notifying their family, or if they cannot find immediate family, they're not really looking hard to find their grandparents. They just take them and then place them into Russian families for adoption.
I hadn't heard that summer camp. It's like going to camp and then, like many American kids do, and then not ever coming home. Okay, one last question, and then then you need to meet the journalist. So that, could you have a budding career here? Okay, one last question.
So with the recent change in the rhetoric coming from the White House, can we expect more and maybe stronger legislature coming to support Ukraine from both sides of the aisle potentially?
Another really good question. So I think you know that through it all, no matter if the president has been saying good things about Vladimir Putin, which made me very angry when he does that, or as recently criticizing him, there has been unified, not everyone, but there has been strong support with Republicans and Democrats for Ukraine in the Senate especially, and we have really kept the line on making sure that the funding continues in the Defense Authorization Act and in the budget, and we've been continuing to work on that. And that hasn't changed, but obviously your question's good, because if in fact the president continues the tone that he set the last week, you know, go for anything, then that will be helpful as we go ahead into the budgeting process, and also as we go ahead into working with our allies, because as you know, they have increased, a number of them have increased their contributions to NATO and their defense budgets and all kinds of things. And so that's been a shift. And then we also have some major sanctions bills and the like to try to get those frozen assets. So all of this would be helpful. Or, you know, there was allegedly gonna be some kind of announcement from the president on tomorrow, and I just don't know if that's true or not. I don't know, yes or no, but that's what we heard, what was it, yesterday or a few days ago. So we'll wait to see what that is, and we just wish we could give him one of these shirts that you guys are wearing. I have one of them too. So just, we wouldn't be where we are without all of you and supporting and putting the right kind of pressure. Another kid it's hard to say no to another child journalist in the back, but it is really important that you keep up what you're doing, which is helping as volunteers in so many ways, and doing the right things, but also the advocacy. Did you have a question, or were you just hoping this was gonna end? No question, yes. That was our sign that this was gonna end, or my own husband's gonna ask a question. All right, thank you everyone for coming, thank you.
Thank you.